My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a marketing manager in Phoenix, Arizona. For 2 years, I watched my husband take 3 showers every single day. One in the morning before work, one the second he walked through the door in the evening, and one more right before bed. For 2 years, I thought he was washing off another woman's perfume, another woman's lipstick, another woman's touch. For 2 years, I convinced myself that my husband was having an affair, and I was too afraid to confront him about it, until our water bill hit $800 in a single month, until I installed a hidden camera in our bathroom, until I watched the footage and saw something that made my blood run cold. My husband wasn't cleaning himself. He was scrubbing his skin raw, crying, bleeding, whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over again, while he tore at his flesh with a brush meant for cleaning grout. And when I checked the trunk of his car and found the hazmat suit, the industrial-grade respirator, and the receipts from a medical waste facility, that's when I knew. My husband wasn't a pest control specialist like he'd told me. He wasn't spraying for termites or setting traps for rats. He was disposing of things that should never see the light of day. Toxic waste, medical waste, things that people pay cash to make disappear. And he'd been bringing traces of it home to me for 2 entire years. But before I tell you exactly what I found in that trunk, before I explain how I discovered the truth about what my husband really did for a living, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel. Drop a comment below telling me your name and where you're watching from. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just about showers or secrets or surveillance cameras. It's about trusting your instincts, even when the truth seems impossible. It's about recognizing when something is wrong, even if you can't explain why. This could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. Let me take you back to the beginning, back to when I still believed I knew my husband. David and I met 6 years ago at a friend's barbecue in Scottsdale. I remember that day so clearly. It was April, before the brutal summer heat set in. Perfect Arizona spring weather, 75 degrees with a light breeze. My friend Melissa was celebrating her 30th birthday with a backyard party at her parents' house. I almost didn't go. I'd been working 60-hour weeks trying to prove myself at my new job. I was exhausted, socially drained, and the last thing I wanted was to make small talk with strangers. But Melissa had insisted. "You work too much," she'd said. "You need to get out, meet people, remember what fun feels like." So I went. I was 26 years old, fresh out of graduate school with my marketing degree, just starting my career at a tech startup downtown. I was nervous, awkward, wearing jeans and a simple blue top because I didn't know what else to wear to a casual barbecue. I knew maybe 5 people at that party. The rest were Melissa's friends from college, from work, from her gym. I felt out of place immediately. I was standing by the pool, nursing a beer I didn't really want, wondering if I could leave without being rude, when David walked up. "You look like you're having exactly as much fun as I am," he said with a smile. I laughed despite myself. "That obvious? I've been here 20 minutes and I've already forgotten 3 people's names. I'm David, by the way, and I promise I'll remember yours." "Emily," I said. "Emily," he repeated, like he was committing it to memory. "How do you know Melissa?" "We were roommates in college. You?" "I went to high school with her little brother. Haven't seen either of them in probably 5 years. But I happened to run into Jordan at the grocery store last week, and he invited me. I figured, why not? Better than sitting home alone on a Saturday." We talked for 20 minutes, then an hour, then 2 hours. David was 28, working in pest control after bouncing between a few different jobs in his 20s. Sales, retail management, construction. He'd finally landed at Desert Pest Solutions and had been there for about a year. "It's not glamorous," he said with a self-deprecating smile, "but it's steady work. People always need pest control in Arizona. Scorpions, roaches, termites. The desert is full of things trying to get into your house." I liked how honest he was about it. No ego, no pretense. Just a guy making a living at an unglamorous job. He asked about my work and actually listened when I talked about marketing strategies and social media campaigns. Most people's eyes glazed over when I talked about work, but David asked follow-up questions, seemed genuinely interested. When the party ended and people started leaving, David asked for my number. "I'd really like to take you to dinner," he said, "if you're interested." I was interested. He called me the next day, not 3 days later to play games, the very next day. We went to dinner at a little Italian place in the Pearl District. The conversation flowed easily. No awkward silences, no forced small talk, just easy. At the end of the night, he walked me to my car and kissed me, gentle and sweet. Perfect first kiss. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Yes," I said immediately. And that was it. We were inseparable after that. Within 3 months, we were spending every weekend together. Within 6 months, he'd moved half his stuff into my apartment. Within 8 months, he proposed. It was a Saturday morning in November. We'd hiked Camelback Mountain, something we did most weekends. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky orange and pink. We reached the summit, and David got down on one knee right there with all of Phoenix spread out below us. "Emily Carter, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple, a small diamond on a silver band, nothing expensive, but it was perfect. I said yes without hesitation, because David was everything I'd been looking for. Kind, thoughtful, honest, real. He wasn't flashy or dramatic. He didn't make grand gestures or empty promises. He was just solid, dependable, a good man, or so I thought. We got married 4 months later at a small venue in Tempe. I wanted something simple. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 21, so it was just me and my older sister Rachel representing my side of the family. David's mother flew in from Oklahoma. His father had passed away when David was 17, so it was just her and a few of David's cousins. About 40 people total, mostly friends. Melissa was my maid of honor. David's best friend from high school, Chris, was his best man. Simple ceremony, simple reception, dinner, dancing, cake. Nothing fancy, but it felt perfect to me. We honeymooned in San Diego for a long weekend, walked on the beach, visited the zoo, ate too much food, made love in our hotel room with the ocean breeze coming through the open windows. It felt like the beginning of everything good. We couldn't afford a house right away. My student loans were crushing me, and David's salary at Desert Pest Solutions was decent but not amazing. So we rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Chandler. It was small but comfortable. We furnished it slowly from estate sales and IKEA, spent weekends painting the walls colors the landlord allowed, hung up photos from our wedding, made it feel like home. David was the kind of husband I'd always wanted, attentive without being clingy, supportive without being overbearing. He'd leave little notes in my lunch bag before work. "Have a great day, love you." Simple things, but they meant everything. He remembered details, that I liked my coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of cream, that I hated cilantro, that I got anxious before big presentations at work and needed him to tell me I'd do great. He'd come home from work tired and smelling like chemicals, but he'd still ask about my day, still listen when I talked about office drama or difficult clients. On his days off, we'd explore Phoenix together, hiking trails in South Mountain, farmers markets downtown, little hole-in-the-wall restaurants we'd find by accident. Saturday mornings became our thing. We'd sleep in, make breakfast together, then spend the day doing whatever we felt like, sometimes hiking, sometimes just lying on the couch watching movies. It was comfortable. It was real. It was everything I'd wanted marriage to be. For the first 2 years, everything was perfect, or as close to perfect as real life gets. And then, slowly, things started to change. The showers started about 2.5 years into our marriage. At first, it was just the after-work shower becoming longer. David would come home at 5:30, strip down in the garage, and head straight for the bathroom. That had always been his routine. Pest control work is messy. I understood wanting to wash off immediately, but his showers had always been quick, 10, maybe 15 minutes. Wash off the day, get dressed, come have dinner with me. Then they started getting longer, 20 minutes, then 30, then 45. "Are you okay in there?" I'd call through the door. "Yeah, just long day, need to unwind." It seemed reasonable. Stressful day at work, a hot shower helps you relax. I didn't think much of it. But then he started taking a shower in the morning too, before work. "I like starting the day fresh," he explained when I asked. "Makes me feel more alert." Okay, some people shower in the morning, some people shower at night, some people do both. It wasn't that weird. But then came the third shower, right before bed. That's when I started noticing. 3 showers every single day, morning, evening, night. Without exception, without variation. Weekdays, weekends, holidays, it didn't matter. 3 showers, always. "Don't you feel like your skin is getting dried out?" I asked one evening. "That's a lot of hot water and soap." David shrugged, pulling his sleeves down over his wrists. "I use moisturizer. It's fine." But I'd noticed his skin looked different, red and irritated in places, especially his hands and forearms, like he'd been scrubbing too hard. "Maybe you should see a dermatologist," I suggested. "It's just from work," David said quickly. "The chemicals we use. It's normal for pest control. Everyone's skin looks like this." I wanted to believe him, so I let it go. But I also started noticing other things, small things that individually seemed meaningless, but together started forming a pattern. David locked the bathroom door, every single time, even though we'd been married for over 2 years and had never locked doors before. He wouldn't let me into the bathroom while he was in there, not even to grab something I'd forgotten, not even for a few seconds. "Can you wait until I'm done?" he'd call through the locked door. I need privacy." Privacy. In a marriage where we'd been completely comfortable around each other before, where we'd brushed our teeth together, where I'd sit on the counter and talk to him while he shaved. Now the door stayed locked, always. And there was something else. The way David looked when he came out of the bathroom after those marathon showers. His eyes would be red and puffy, like he'd been crying. His skin would be bright pink, almost raw-looking. And sometimes I'd notice his hands shaking slightly as he got dressed. "Are you sure you're okay?" I'd ask. "Just tired," he'd say. "Work is stressful right now." I wanted to push, wanted to demand answers, but I also didn't want to be that wife, the one who interrogates her husband about taking long showers, the one who makes a big deal out of nothing. So I stayed quiet, told myself I was overreacting, told myself it was fine. Until the water bill arrived in June, $843. I stared at that number for a full 5 minutes before calling the water company, convinced there had to be some mistake. "There's no mistake, ma'am," the customer service representative told me. "Your usage has been increasing steadily for 18 months. We actually flagged your account for review 6 months ago, but there was no response to our notification." "What notification?" I asked. "We sent a letter to your address suggesting you check for leaks. When we didn't hear back, we assumed you'd handled the issue." I'd never seen any letter. David must have gotten the mail that day, must have thrown it away without telling me. "How is this even possible?" I asked. "We're 2 people. We don't water a lawn. We don't have kids. How can we be using this much water?" "Based on the pattern," the representative said carefully, "it appears to be coming from indoor usage, most likely showers, baths, or a running toilet. I'd recommend having a plumber inspect your fixtures." After I hung up, I sat at our kitchen table doing calculations in my head. 3 showers every day, at least 30 to 45 minutes each. That's over 2 hours of running water daily. Multiply that by 30 days a month. No wonder our bill was astronomical. I felt something shift inside me. Not quite anger, not quite fear. Something in between. Because David had to know. He had to realize how much water he was using, how much it was costing us. And he'd never said anything. Never tried to cut back. Never even acknowledged it was a problem. When David came home that evening, I was waiting with the bill. He went through his usual routine. Strip in the garage, start the washing machine, head for the bathroom. "David, wait!" I held up the bill. "We need to talk about this." He glanced at it, and for just a fraction of a second, I saw something flash across his face. Not surprise, fear. But then it was gone, replaced with concern. $800? There must be a leak. There's no leak, I said firmly. I called the company. They said it's usage. Your showers, David. You're in there for hours every day. I didn't realize it was that long. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. I'm sorry. I'll try to be faster. Why do you need to shower 3 times a day? I asked directly. That's not normal, David. That's excessive. It's the job, he said, and his voice cracked slightly. Emily, you don't understand what it's like. The chemicals we use, they get on your skin, in your hair, your clothes. I feel like I can't get clean, like it's always there, you know? I need to scrub it off. For 45 minutes? David, that's not just washing off chemicals. That's... What? He asked defensively. What is it? I didn't know how to finish that sentence. That's obsessive behavior seemed too harsh. That's a sign of mental illness seemed too dramatic. So I just said, that's concerning. I'll try to be faster, David repeated. I promise. He went to take his shower. I set a timer on my phone. 52 minutes. The next morning, 38 minutes. Evening, 57 minutes. Before bed, 43 minutes. He wasn't trying to be faster. If anything, the showers were getting longer. Over the next 2 weeks, I started paying closer attention to everything David did. The clothes. Every single day, he'd throw away what he'd worn to work. I'd watch him strip in the garage and dump everything directly into the trash can. Not the washing machine, the trash. Those jeans were brand new, I commented one evening. They're contaminated, David said quickly. Better to dispose of them properly. Contaminated with what? Pesticides wash out. Not always, and some of the things we handle, it's safer this way. The company reimburses me anyway. Do they? I asked. What? Do they actually reimburse you? Because you're throwing away a full outfit every single day, David. That's expensive, even with reimbursement. They do, he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. It's in my contract. I didn't believe him, but I also didn't have proof he was lying. I started watching the mail, started going through our credit card statements line by line. If he was buying clothes every day, there should be charges, receipts, something. But there was nothing. No regular purchases from clothing stores. No big charges that suggested he was buying new work clothes daily, which meant either his company really was providing them, or he was lying about where the money was coming from. I also started noticing the smell, that chemical smell I'd caught on him occasionally before. Now I smelled it all the time. Underneath his soap and shampoo, in our bedroom, on the sheets, on his side of the bed. It was sharp and astringent, not quite bleach, not quite ammonia, something industrial and wrong. And I started feeling tired, more tired than usual. I'd come home from work exhausted, even on days when I hadn't done anything particularly strenuous. I'd fall asleep on the couch by 8 p.m., wake up groggy and disoriented. Maybe you're coming down with something, David suggested when I mentioned it. Maybe, or maybe it was stress, or maybe it was something else entirely. Then one evening in July, my friend Melissa came over for dinner. David was working late, so it was just us. Wine and take-out Thai food and catching up. We were sitting on the couch when she suddenly wrinkled her nose. Do you guys have a gas leak or something? What? I asked. It smells chemical in here, kind of like cleaning products, but stronger. I'd gotten so used to the smell I barely noticed it anymore. But now that she mentioned it, I could smell it too, permeating our whole apartment. It's from David's work, I explained. Pest control. The chemicals kind of linger. Melissa looked concerned. Emily, that doesn't seem safe. If you can smell it that strongly, that means you're breathing it in. You should probably air out the apartment more. Open windows. Get some circulation going. After she left, I opened every window in the apartment, let the night air flow through. The smell did fade a bit, but the next day, after David came home and went through his routine, it was back. I was living in a chemical fog and hadn't even realized it. By the end of July, I was convinced David was having an affair. It was the only explanation that made sense. The excessive showers, the locked bathroom door, the throwing away of clothes, the strange hours. He was seeing someone else, someone from work maybe, a client, a coworker, and he was washing away the evidence every single day. The thought made me physically sick. We'd been married less than 3 years. We were supposed to be in the honeymoon phase still, happy, connected, in love. But somewhere along the way, I'd lost him. Or maybe I'd never really had him at all. I thought about confronting him directly, sitting him down and asking point blank, "Are you cheating on me?" But I was terrified of his answer, because if he said yes, our marriage was over. And despite everything, I didn't want it to be over. I wanted him to tell me I was wrong, that there was a perfectly reasonable explanation, that he still loved me. So instead, I started looking for proof. I started small, checking his phone when he was in the shower, going through his text messages, call logs, emails. Nothing suspicious, just work communications, scheduling with clients, inventory orders, conversations with his boss and coworkers. Normal, mundane, boring. No messages to a mysterious woman. No deleted conversations that might indicate he was hiding something. I checked our credit card statements again, looking for hotel charges, restaurant bills, anything that might indicate dates with another woman. Nothing. Every charge was accounted for. Gas, groceries, utilities, the occasional lunch near his work. Nothing suspicious. I even called his office one afternoon, pretending I needed to reach him urgently. "He's out on a job right now," his secretary Diane told me cheerfully. "Should be at the Henderson property on Baseline Road. Want me to have him call you?" I drove to Baseline Road, found the Henderson property. David's work van was parked outside. I sat in my car across the street for 20 minutes. He came out with his equipment, loaded it into the van, drove away. Everything checked out. He was exactly where he said he'd be, doing exactly what he claimed to be doing. So why did my gut keep screaming that something was wrong? In early August, I confided in my sister Rachel. Rachel is 3 years older than me, works as a nurse at Banner Hospital, practical and no nonsense. If anyone could give me an objective perspective, it was her. We met for lunch at a cafe in Scottsdale. I told her everything: the showers, the bills, the locked doors, the chemical smell, the thrown-away clothes. Rachel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Emily, this doesn't sound like an affair to me," she said finally. "Then what is it?" I asked desperately. "I don't know, but the excessive showering, the scrubbing, that sounds more like obsessive-compulsive behavior, or maybe a contamination phobia. Has David ever shown signs of anxiety or OCD? Not that I've noticed, but it did start kind of suddenly about 6 months ago." "That's concerning," Rachel said. "Mental health issues don't usually just appear overnight. There's usually a trigger, something that happened that made him feel like he needs to wash constantly." "Like what?" "Could be anything. Exposure to something at work that scared him, a close call with a dangerous chemical. Or," she hesitated, "or he's hiding something, and the excessive cleaning is guilt-based." "Guilt about an affair?" "Maybe, or guilt about something else. Emily, I think you need to talk to him directly. Tell him you're worried about him. Suggest he see a therapist or a doctor." I nodded, but I knew I wouldn't do it, because I was afraid of what he might tell me. Instead, I made a different decision. I decided to see what was really happening during those showers. I decided to install a camera. I spent days researching hidden cameras online, reading reviews, comparing features, trying to figure out what would work best in a bathroom setting. I needed something waterproof, something that could record for extended periods, something that looked completely innocuous so David wouldn't notice it. I finally settled on a camera disguised as a shampoo bottle. It looked exactly like a regular toiletry bottle, but had a small lens hidden in the design and a battery that could record for up to 48 hours. It cost $230. I charged it to my personal credit card, the one David didn't have access to. It arrived 3 days later. I waited until David left for work, then set it up in our bathroom, positioned it on the shower shelf between his actual shampoo and body wash. It blended in perfectly. Unless you knew what to look for, you'd never notice it was a camera. I activated it at 7 in the morning. David would take his after-work shower around 6 p.m. That gave the camera plenty of battery life to capture what I needed. Then I went to work and spent the entire day feeling sick with anxiety. Part of me hoped I'd find nothing, that the camera would show David just taking a normal shower, maybe singing to himself, maybe just standing under the water, relaxing. Proof that I was overreacting and there was nothing sinister happening. But a larger part of me knew I was about to see something I couldn't unsee. When I got home at 5:30, David wasn't there yet. I had 30 minutes before he'd arrive. 30 minutes to calm my racing heart and pretend everything was normal. At 6:02, I heard his car pull into the garage, heard the garage door close, heard him go through his routine, strip, start the washing machine, head for the bathroom. The bathroom door closed. I heard the lock click, heard the water start running. I sat on our couch, staring at the wall, listening to water run for the next 49 minutes. When David finally emerged, his skin was bright red, his eyes were puffy, he looked exhausted and defeated. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Yeah," he said quietly, "really long." He climbed into bed early that night, fell asleep almost immediately, or pretended to. I waited until I was certain he was unconscious. Then I crept into the bathroom, retrieved the camera, and took it to the living room. My hands shook as I connected it to my laptop, as I downloaded the video file, as I pulled up the footage and pressed play. And what I saw made me understand that David wasn't having an affair. He was doing something so much worse. The video started normally enough. David entering the bathroom, locking the door, starting the shower, testing the water temperature with his hand. He undressed slowly, methodically, folding each piece of clothing and setting it on the counter, even though I knew he'd throw it all away later. He stepped into the shower, stood under the spray, and just stopped. He didn't reach for soap, didn't wash his hair, just stood there with his eyes closed, water pouring over him, for 10 full minutes. I watched the timer in the corner of the video, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, David standing completely still under the water like a statue. Then finally he moved, but not to wash himself. He reached for something on the shower shelf, a brush, a hard-bristled scrub brush that I recognized from under our kitchen sink, the kind meant for cleaning grout or scrubbing pots and pans. He wet the brush, applied a bar of soap directly to the bristles, and then he started scrubbing his arm. Not gently, not the way you'd normally exfoliate. He scrubbed hard, violent, aggressive strokes, back and forth across his forearm. I could see his skin turning bright red almost immediately, and while he scrubbed, he talked to himself, whispered, but the camera's audio was good enough to pick it up. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry." Over and over, the same words, the same desperate apology to no one and nothing. He scrubbed his other arm, then his chest, his stomach, his legs, every inch of exposed skin, scrubbing so hard I could see welts forming, see raw patches appearing. And he kept apologizing, kept begging forgiveness from invisible accusers. After 20 minutes of this, he set down the brush. I thought maybe he was done. But then he picked up a bottle of body wash and squeezed the entire thing onto his hands. He scrubbed again, with his bare hands this time, rubbing and scratching at his skin like he was trying to peel it off. His movements became more frantic, more desperate. He was sobbing now, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. "Get it off," he whispered. "Please get it off me. I can't get clean. Why can't I get clean?" He scrubbed until his skin broke, until I could see blood mixing with the soap and water, until his hands were shaking too badly to continue. Then he just collapsed, sank down to the shower floor, and sat there under the spray, crying like his heart was breaking. For another 15 minutes he sat there, sobbing, occasionally whispering, "I'm sorry," or "Please forgive me." Finally, he seemed to run out of tears. He stood up slowly, turned off the water, dried himself with a towel, and when he looked at himself in the mirror, his expression was so hollow, so empty, that I barely recognized him. He looked like a ghost, like someone already dead but still walking around. He got dressed, unlocked the door, left the bathroom. The video ended. I sat in our dark living room, staring at the frozen final frame on my laptop screen, my husband's face in the mirror, looking at himself with absolute despair. This wasn't about an affair. This wasn't about cheating or betrayal or another woman. This was about guilt, deep, soul-crushing guilt, the kind of guilt that makes you try to scrub your own skin off, the kind that makes you apologize to no one for hours. David had done something, or was doing something so terrible he couldn't live with himself, and whatever it was destroying him from the inside out. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to David, listening to him breathe, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd seen. What could make someone hate themselves that much? What kind of guilt produces that level of self-harm? Had he hurt someone? Killed someone accidentally? Was he involved in something illegal? The chemical smell, the thrown-away clothes, the cash receipts I'd found months ago in his wallet and hadn't thought much about at the time. It all pointed to something bigger than pest control, something David was hiding, something that was eating him alive. The next morning, after David left for work, I went into the garage. I'd never gone through his car before. It felt like a violation of privacy. But after what I'd seen on that video, I didn't care about privacy anymore. I opened the driver's side door. The interior was immaculate as always. No trash, no papers, no evidence of anything unusual. I checked the glove compartment. Registration, insurance, car manual, nothing suspicious. I checked under the seats. Nothing. Then I popped the trunk. And that's when I found the duffel bag. It was hidden under a black tarp, shoved into the far corner. A large, military-style duffel bag that I'd never seen before. My hands shook as I unzipped it. Inside was a hazmat suit, full body protection, bright yellow with reflective strips, the kind of thing you'd wear in a nuclear plant or chemical facility. The label inside read, Level C Chemical Protection, Organic Vapors and Particulates. Next to the suit was a respirator mask, not a simple dust mask, a full-face respirator with replaceable cartridge filters, industrial grade, the kind that costs hundreds of dollars. There were thick rubber gloves that went up past the elbow, disposable boot covers, safety goggles rated for chemical splash protection, and at the bottom of the bag, stuffed into a side pocket, were receipts, dozens of them, all crumpled and faded but still readable. Desert Medical Waste Services, $350, cash. BioClean Industrial Solutions, $725, cash. Phoenix Hazardous Material Disposal, $1,100, cash. Scottsdale Biohazard Cleanup, $890, cash. The dates went back over a year. Some weeks had 3 or 4 receipts, all for waste disposal services, all paid in cash, all for amounts that suggested he was disposing of significant quantities of something. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and searched for Desert Medical Waste Services. Their website loaded. Professional design, legitimate-looking company. Proper disposal of infectious medical waste, pharmaceutical waste, sharps, pathological waste, and biohazardous materials. Licensed and certified for healthcare facilities, research laboratories, veterinary clinics, and industrial clients. Compliant with OSHA and EPA regulations. Medical waste. Biohazardous materials. This wasn't pest control equipment. This was what you wore when you were handling things that could kill you. I searched the next company, BioClean Industrial Solutions. Specializing in cleanup and disposal of toxic chemical waste, contaminated materials, hazardous substances, and industrial byproducts. Certified hazardous waste management. Emergency response services available. Chemical waste, toxic materials, hazardous substances. My husband was disposing of dangerous waste. Medical waste, chemical waste, things that required full hazmat protection and generated thousands of dollars in cash payments. But he worked for a pest control company, a legitimate, licensed business that sprayed for bugs and set traps for rodents. This equipment, these receipts, they had nothing to do with pest control, which meant David was doing something else, something on the side, something illegal. Because legitimate waste disposal doesn't get paid in cash. Legitimate businesses don't hide hazmat suits in their car trunks. I sat in our garage, surrounded by evidence of my husband's secret life, and felt my entire reality crumble. Who was David Carter? What had he been doing for the past year? And what had he been bringing home to me? I called in sick to work, told my boss I had food poisoning. Then I drove to a coffee shop across town where I knew David would never go. I needed to think, needed to figure out what to do with this information. I could confront David directly, demand answers. But what if he lied? What if he had a prepared explanation that sounded plausible enough to make me doubt what I'd seen? I could call the police, report what? That my husband had a hazmat suit? That wasn't illegal. That he had receipts for waste disposal services. That wasn't evidence of a crime by itself. I needed more information. I needed to know exactly what David was doing. So I made a decision. I was going to follow him. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm, got ready for work like normal, kissed David goodbye like everything was fine. But instead of driving to my office, I drove to a parking lot 3 blocks from Desert Pest Solutions and waited. At 7:15, David's blue Honda pulled into the parking lot. He got out, carrying his lunch cooler, and went inside the building. 20 minutes later, he came back out. But he'd changed clothes. Instead of the casual shirt and jeans he'd worn from home, he was now wearing work clothes, dark pants, a company polo with the Desert Pest Solutions logo. He got into one of the company vans, white van with the company name and phone number painted on the side, and he drove away. I followed at a distance, keeping 4 or 5 cars between us, praying he wouldn't notice me. He drove south, out of the commercial district, past residential neighborhoods, into an industrial area on the outskirts of Phoenix, where warehouses and manufacturing facilities clustered together. He turned into a property with no signage, just a gate with a keypad. He entered a code. The gate slid open. He drove inside. I parked across the street, far enough away that I wouldn't be obvious, close enough that I could see the property. It looked abandoned. 3 old warehouse buildings with faded paint and boarded-up windows, cracked asphalt parking lot with weeds growing through, chain-link fence around the perimeter with no trespassing signs, no other vehicles, no people, nothing that suggested this was an active business. I waited. At 8:45, David emerged from one of the buildings, but he wasn't wearing his work clothes anymore. He was wearing the hazmat suit, full body protection, respirator mask, gloves. He looked like something out of a sci-fi movie or a horror film. He was carrying something, large black industrial trash bags, heavy bags. He struggled with the weight as he carried them to the van. He loaded them into the back, 6 bags total. Then he stripped off the hazmat suit right there in the parking lot, stuffed it into another bag, and tossed it in the van too. He got in the driver's seat and drove out of the facility. I followed him again, this time to an address I recognized from the receipts, Desert Medical Waste Services, a legitimate disposal facility, clean, well-maintained, with proper signage and permits displayed. David pulled into a loading bay. A worker in protective gear came out to help him unload. They transferred the bags from David's van to a specialized disposal container. The worker checked something on a clipboard, then handed David what looked like cash. David counted it, nodded, and drove away. The entire transaction took maybe 15 minutes. I sat in my car across the street, watching this play out, and understood. David was transporting medical waste or chemical waste from that abandoned facility to legitimate disposal services. He was the middleman, picking up waste that someone was generating illegally and bringing it to proper disposal facilities, getting paid in cash, no documentation, no paper trail. Someone was producing hazardous waste without permits, without proper licensing, and they were paying David to make it disappear. That's why he needed the hazmat suit. That's why he was scrubbing himself raw every night. That's why he came home smelling like chemicals. He was handling things that could kill him if he wasn't careful. Things that required full protective gear. Things that left residue on his skin, in his lungs, that no amount of showering could truly wash away. And for over a year, he'd been bringing traces of it home to me. I drove home in a daze. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. David was involved in illegal waste disposal. He was exposing himself to hazardous materials, and by extension, he was exposing me. That chemical smell in our apartment, that wasn't just lingering pesticides. That was toxic waste, medical waste, God knows what else. I'd been breathing it in for months, sleeping in it, eating in rooms contaminated by whatever David was bringing home, on his skin, in his hair, on his clothes. And then I thought about how tired I'd been feeling, how I'd been getting headaches, nausea, that metallic taste in my mouth I couldn't explain. I pulled over to the side of the road and vomited. When I got home, I opened every window in the apartment, turned on every fan, stripped our bed and washed all the linens on the hottest setting. Then I stood in the shower for 45 minutes myself, scrubbing, trying to wash away contamination I couldn't see but knew was there. I finally understood why David showered the way he did. He could feel it on him, could feel the poison seeping into his skin, and he was trying desperately to get it off. But you can't wash away guilt, and you can't wash away the damage that's already been done. I needed help. I needed someone who could tell me what to do with this information. So I went to the police. I called ahead and made an appointment to speak with a detective, told them I had information about a possible environmental crime. They set me up with Detective Sarah Morrison from the Environmental Crimes Unit. We met the next day at a coffee shop in Mesa, neutral territory, somewhere I wouldn't be seen by anyone who knew me or David. Detective Morrison was in her mid-40s, sharp eyes, professional demeanor. She listened without interrupting as I told her everything. The showers, the water bills, the hidden camera footage, following David to the abandoned facility, the hazmat suit, the receipts. I showed her the photos I'd taken, the video I'd recorded, everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Mrs. Carter, what you're describing is potentially very serious. Illegal disposal of medical or chemical waste carries heavy penalties, but I need to verify what's actually being transported before we can move forward." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "I need a sample of whatever waste your husband is handling. If you can get me something, anything with residue, we can have it tested. Once we know what we're dealing with, we can determine the appropriate response." "He keeps empty bags in the garage sometimes," I said, "in case he needs them for whatever he does. There might be residue inside." "That would be perfect," Detective Morrison said. "Bring me whatever you can find. We'll run it through our lab. And Mrs. Carter, be careful. If your husband is handling hazardous materials without proper training or licensing, you may have been exposed as well. I'd recommend seeing a doctor." I nodded numbly. "I will. One more thing. Don't confront your husband. Don't let him know you've contacted us. If he realizes we're investigating, he could destroy evidence or flee. Can you keep this quiet?" "Yes," I promised. That evening, while David was in the shower going through his ritual of self-destruction, I went into the garage. I found the bags exactly where I thought they'd be, black industrial trash bags, folded and stacked on a shelf. I pulled one out carefully. There was residue inside, dark and sticky, clinging to the plastic, with that same sharp chemical smell I'd been living with for months. I sealed the bag inside a plastic container, double-bagged it, hid it in my car. The next morning, I delivered it to Detective Morrison. The test results came back 5 days later. Detective Morrison called me and asked me to come to the police station immediately. I drove there in a panic. walked into her office on shaking legs. She closed the door, gestured for me to sit down. "Mrs. Carter, the residue you brought us tested positive for multiple hazardous substances, industrial solvents including trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene, heavy metals including lead and mercury, pharmaceutical waste including expired chemotherapy drugs and controlled substances, and biological material that appears to be human tissue and bodily fluids." My vision blurred. Human tissue? "We believe your husband is disposing of medical waste from an unlicensed source. Based on the composition, it's likely coming from an illegal medical facility, possibly an underground clinic, performing procedures they're not licensed for." "Like what?" I whispered. Detective Morrison hesitated. "There are clinics that perform procedures without proper certification, abortions in states where they're restricted, plastic surgery by unlicensed practitioners, experimental treatments not approved by the FDA. These facilities generate medical waste but can't use legitimate disposal services without documentation. So they hire people like your husband to make it disappear." "Oh, God," I breathed. "The chemicals you were exposed to are extremely dangerous. Trichloroethylene is a known carcinogen. It causes liver damage, kidney damage, neurological issues. Perchloroethylene affects the central nervous system. The heavy metals can cause permanent organ damage. And the pharmaceutical waste, especially chemotherapy drugs, are highly toxic, even in trace amounts." "I've been living with this for over a year," I said. "I've been breathing it, sleeping in it." "I know, and I'm sorry. We're opening a full investigation. We'll be surveilling the facility your husband is collecting from. We'll need your cooperation, but I need you to stay away from your house for now. Is there somewhere you can go?" "My sister's." "Good. Go there tonight. Pack a bag while your husband is at work. Don't tell him where you're going. Don't answer his calls. Let us handle this." "When will you arrest him?" I asked. "Soon. We need to identify everyone involved in the operation. Your husband is just the transport. There's a facility generating this waste, likely doctors or medical staff, possibly more disposal operators. We want to get everyone." I nodded, but I was barely processing her words. All I could think about was the poison, the contamination, what it had done to David, what it was doing to me. That evening, I waited until David left for work. Then I packed a bag, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, important documents, and I left. Drove to Rachel's apartment in Scottsdale, showed up at her door with my suitcase and tears streaming down my face. "What happened?" Rachel asked, pulling me inside immediately. I told her everything. The video, the hazmat suit, following David, the police, the test results. Rachel listened with growing horror. When I finished, she wrapped her arms around me and just held me while I cried. "You're safe now," she whispered. "You're safe. We'll get through this." But I didn't feel safe. I felt contaminated, poisoned, like my husband had been slowly killing me and I'd been too blind to see it. My phone started ringing. David. I didn't answer. It rang again and again. 37 calls that first night. Text messages flooded in. "Where are you? Emily, please answer. I'm worried. What's wrong? Did I do something? Please come home." I turned off my phone. 3 days later, Detective Morrison called. "We made arrests this morning. Your husband, 2 doctors running an illegal abortion clinic, and 4 others involved in the operation." "Is it over?" I asked. "The investigation is ongoing, but yes, your husband is in custody. He's being charged with illegal disposal of medical waste, operating without proper permits, and conspiracy. He's cooperating with our investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence." "How long will he go to prison?" "Probably 18 to 24 months with cooperation, maybe less with good behavior." 18 months. For poisoning me for over a year, for bringing hazardous waste into our home, for lying to my face every single day. It didn't seem like enough. "There's something else," Detective Morrison said carefully. "We need you to get comprehensive medical testing. The substances you were exposed to, they can cause serious long-term health effects, cancer, organ damage, neurological problems. We need to establish a baseline now so we can monitor you going forward." "Okay," I whispered. The medical testing took 3 weeks. Blood draws, urine samples, imaging scans, neurological assessments. I sat in waiting rooms filling out forms, describing my symptoms, admitting that I'd been exposed to industrial chemicals, heavy metals, pharmaceutical waste, biohazardous materials. The looks I got from medical staff ranged from pity to horror. Finally, I met with Dr. Patricia Chen, a toxicologist specializing in environmental exposure. She sat across from me with my test results spread out on her desk. "Mrs. Carter, I'm going to be direct with you. You have elevated levels of lead and mercury in your blood. Not immediately life-threatening, but concerning. We need to start chelation therapy to remove the heavy metals from your system." "Okay," I said numbly. "You also show early signs of liver damage. Your enzyme levels are elevated, indicating toxic injury. This is likely from the chlorinated solvents. The good news is, if we catch it early, your liver has remarkable capacity to heal. But you'll need to avoid alcohol and certain medications, and we'll need to monitor your liver function closely." "What about cancer?" I asked, the question I'd been too afraid to ask. Dr. Chen's expression was gentle. "The chemicals you were exposed to are carcinogenic. Trichloroethylene, in particular, is strongly linked to kidney cancer, liver cancer, and lymphoma. Perchloroethylene to bladder cancer and leukemia. At this point, we don't see any signs of cancer, but you're at elevated risk. I recommend screening every 6 months for the next 10 years. CT scans, blood work, monitoring for any changes." 10 years. A decade of waiting to find out if my husband's crimes would kill me. "You were fortunate," Dr. Chen continued. "Your exposure was secondary. Trace amounts on surfaces, in the air, through skin contact with your husband. If you'd been directly exposed to the waste itself, the damage would be far worse. Your husband, for example, will likely have much more significant health issues." "I don't care about his health," I said flatly. Dr. Chen nodded. "I understand, but Emily, you survived this. Your body is strong. With treatment and monitoring, you're going to be okay." I wanted to believe her, but I didn't feel okay. I felt broken. The divorce papers were filed 3 weeks after David's arrest. He was still in jail awaiting trial. His lawyer contacted me, said David wanted to talk, wanted to explain, wanted to apologize. I refused. I had nothing to say to him. The lawyer sent me a letter David had written. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Emily, I know you hate me. I hate myself. Every shower, every time I tried to scrub it away, I was thinking of you, of what I was doing to you. I wanted to stop. I tried to stop, but I was in too deep. It started as one delivery, just one time. Guy offered me $500 cash to move some bags from a warehouse to a disposal facility. Said it was medical waste from a clinic that needed discreet handling. I knew it wasn't exactly legal, but $500 for 2 hours of work? We needed the money. Your student loans were crushing us." Then he called again and again. The money kept getting better. $1,000, $1,500. Soon I was making more from the deliveries than from my actual job. I told myself it was harmless, just moving bags, just helping a clinic avoid some paperwork. But then I started getting sick. Headaches, nausea, dizziness. I realized what I was handling was dangerous. Really dangerous. I bought the hazmat suit, started being more careful. But I also started understanding what I was really involved in. An illegal abortion clinic, performing procedures on women who had nowhere else to go. Women from states where abortion is banned. Women who couldn't afford to travel. Women in desperate situations. The doctors told me I was helping people, that what they were doing was necessary, that I was part of something important, even if it was illegal. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to think the money I was making, the risk I was taking, was for a good cause. But Emily, I knew what I was bringing home. I knew I was contaminating you. Every time I walked through our door, every time I touched you, every time I slept in our bed, I was poisoning you. That's why I showered. That's why I scrubbed until I bled. Because I could feel it on me, could feel the guilt, the contamination, the knowledge that I was destroying the person I loved most. I'm so sorry. I know those words mean nothing now, but I am. I'm sorrier than you'll ever know. David. I threw the letter in the trash without finishing it. I didn't care about his excuses. I didn't care about his guilt. He'd had 1,000 chances to stop, to tell me the truth, to choose me over the money. And every single day for over a year, he'd chosen the money. The trial happened in November. I didn't attend, but Detective Morrison called me afterward with the results. David had pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. 18 months in federal prison, 3 years supervised release afterward, $10,000 in fines, and a permanent criminal record. The doctors who ran the clinic got much worse. 10 years each for performing illegal medical procedures, operating without licenses, and endangering public health. The facility was shut down. The waste was properly remediated. The investigation closed. Justice, I suppose. But it felt hollow. David going to prison didn't undo the damage to my liver, didn't remove the heavy metals from my blood, didn't erase the decade I'd spent waiting to see if I'd develop cancer. It didn't give me back the year I'd lost to his lies. The chelation therapy lasted 6 months, twice-weekly IV infusions that left me exhausted and nauseous, slowly removing the lead and mercury from my system 1 milligram at a time. My liver function improved. Dr. Chen was pleased with my progress, said I was young, my body was resilient, I was responding well to treatment. But I still went to bed every night wondering if invisible damage was being done, if cells were mutating, if cancer was growing somewhere I couldn't see yet. I started seeing Dr. Susan Chen, a therapist who specialized in trauma and betrayal. We met every week, talked about trust, about healing, about how to rebuild a life after it's been destroyed. You're not just grieving the end of your marriage, Dr. Chen told me during one session. You're grieving the death of the reality you thought you were living. That's a unique kind of loss. The past you thought you had never existed. That's incredibly disorienting. She was right. I wasn't just mourning David. I was mourning the version of myself who'd believed in him, who'd trusted him, who'd thought she was building a life with someone honest and good. That Emily was dead. In her place was someone harder, someone who questioned everything, someone who would probably never fully trust anyone again. The house in Gilbert sold in December. I couldn't afford to keep it on my own, and I didn't want to. Too many memories, too much contamination. The EPA had tested the house after David's arrest, found traces of the chemicals on surfaces throughout. The carpet, the furniture, the walls, everything. They recommended professional remediation before sale, stripping the carpet, repainting, deep cleaning. It cost $8,000. Money I didn't have. Money I had to borrow from Rachel. When it finally sold, after remediation and repairs, I barely broke even after paying off the mortgage and the loan from Rachel. I used what little was left to pay medical bills and rent a small 1-bedroom apartment in Tempe, close to Rachel, close to support. It was tiny, just 600 square feet, but it was mine, clean, uncontaminated, safe. I threw away everything from the house, furniture, dishes, clothes, bedding. I didn't want anything that had been exposed, anything that might carry traces of what David had brought home. I started completely over. New furniture from IKEA, new dishes from Target, new clothes, new life. Going back to work was harder than I expected. Everyone knew. The story had made the news. Local man arrested for illegal medical waste disposal. My coworkers had read the articles, seen David's mugshot. They were kind, sympathetic, but I could see the pity in their eyes, the way they looked at me like I was fragile, broken, a victim. I hated it. I threw myself into my job, took on extra projects, volunteered for campaigns no one else wanted, worked late, worked weekends, filled every hour with tasks and deadlines and responsibilities that kept me from thinking. My boss noticed, called me into her office. Emily, I appreciate your dedication, but you've been working 60-hour weeks. You need to take care of yourself. Work helps, I said simply. Work is avoidance, she replied gently. I know what you went through. You don't have to prove anything to anyone here. Take some time. Go on vacation. See your therapist. Heal. But I didn't know how to heal. Didn't know how to sit still with the anger and betrayal and fear. Work was easier. Work made sense. The first cancer screening happened in March, 6 months after the exposure testing. 6 months of chelation therapy and monitoring and waiting. CT scans of my chest, abdomen, and pelvis, looking for any signs of tumors, any abnormal masses, any evidence that the carcinogens had done their damage. I lay in the scanner, listening to the machine whir and click around me, and tried not to think about what they might find. The results came back 3 days later. Clear. No signs of cancer, no abnormalities, everything looked normal. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was temporary reprieve, because there would be another scan in 6 months, and another 6 months after that, for 10 years. 10 years of waiting, 10 years of holding my breath, 10 years of wondering if this scan would be the one that found something. Rachel was my lifeline through all of this. She let me stay with her during the worst of it, held me when I cried, sat with me during medical appointments, never once said, I told you so, even though she'd never fully trusted David. You couldn't have known, she told me one evening over wine on her balcony. Emily, you're not psychic. You're not responsible for his choices. But I ignored the signs, I said. The red flags were there, the excessive showering, the locked doors, the chemical smell. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't push. I didn't investigate until it was too late. You investigated when you were ready, Rachel said firmly. You trusted your instincts. You installed that camera. You followed him. You went to the police. You saved yourself, Emily. That's what matters. But what if I'd done it sooner? What if I'd checked his car 3 months earlier, 6 months? Would I have less damage? Would I be less contaminated? You can't think like that. You'll drive yourself crazy with what-ifs. You survived. Focus on that. I tried, but the what-ifs haunted me anyway. In June, a year after I'd first installed that camera, I got a letter in the mail from the Arizona Department of Health Services. They were conducting a follow-up investigation into everyone who'd been exposed through David's illegal activities. They wanted to offer me free medical monitoring for 15 years instead of 10, more comprehensive screening, better resources. They also informed me that I qualified for victim compensation. The state had a fund for people harmed by environmental crimes. I could apply for reimbursement of medical expenses, lost wages, therapy costs. I filled out the application, documented every medical bill, every therapy session, every day I'd taken off work for appointments. It totaled over $40,000 so far. The compensation board approved $12,000. Better than nothing, but it didn't come close to covering what this had cost me financially, let alone emotionally. In August, I started dating again. A guy named Marcus I met through a friend. Nice, normal, worked as an architect, no criminal background, no secrets. We went on 3 dates, dinner, a movie, coffee. He was perfectly pleasant, perfectly boring, perfectly safe. And I felt absolutely nothing. On the 3rd date, he reached across the table to hold my hand, and I flinched, pulled back reflexively, saw hurt flash across his face. I'm sorry, I said. I'm not ready for this. Your friend mentioned you went through something difficult, Marcus said carefully. I understand if you need more time. I don't know how much time I need, I admitted. Maybe years, maybe never. He nodded, paid the check, walked me to my car, gave me a polite hug goodbye. I never heard from him again. I couldn't blame him. Who wants to date someone so broken they can't even hold hands without flinching? David was released from prison in March of the following year. 15 months served, 3 months off for good behavior. His lawyer sent me a notification. David would be living with his mother in Oklahoma. He would not be contacting me. He would be complying with all terms of his supervised release. I was relieved I wouldn't see him, but I also felt a surge of anger. 15 months. He'd served 15 months for poisoning me, for lying to me, for destroying my health and my life. And now he was free, living with his mother, getting to move on while I was still living with the consequences of his choices. I thought about reaching out, sending him a letter, telling him exactly how much damage he'd done, exactly what my life looked like now. But Dr. Chen advised against it. He's not part of your healing process, Emily. Contacting him only keeps you tied to the trauma. You need to let him go, not for his sake, for yours. She was right, but letting go felt like letting him off the hook. The second year was harder than the first in some ways. The shock had worn off, the immediate crisis had passed, but the long-term reality set in. This was my life now. Medical monitoring every 6 months, blood tests and scans and appointments with specialists, living with the knowledge that I might develop cancer at any time, that my liver might fail, that the neurological symptoms I sometimes experienced, headaches, difficulty concentrating, occasional tremors, might be permanent damage. I had good days and bad days, good weeks and bad weeks. On good days, I felt almost normal. I went to work, saw friends, went hiking, remembered how to laugh, remembered what it felt like to be the old Emily, the one who existed before David's lies. On bad days, I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't stop thinking about the contamination, couldn't stop feeling angry and scared and broken. Dr. Chen helped, Rachel helped, work helped, but there was a loneliness to this that nothing could quite fix, because no one understood what it felt like to be poisoned by someone you loved, to have your own home turned into a toxic waste site, to know that your body would never be quite right again because of someone else's greed and cowardice. The third cancer screening happened in September. Clear again. No signs of disease. Dr. Chen was optimistic. Your body is healing, she told me. Your liver function is almost back to normal. Your heavy metal levels are well within acceptable range. You're doing remarkably well, Emily. For someone who was poisoned, I said dryly. For anyone, she corrected. You're healthy, you're strong, you're going to be okay. I wanted to believe her, and on my good days, I almost did. It's been 2 years now since I installed that camera in our bathroom. 2 years since I discovered what David was really doing during those marathon showers. I'm 34 years old. I live alone in a small apartment in Tempe. I go to work. I see my therapist every other week. I get scanned for cancer every 6 months. I take medication for my liver. I see Rachel for dinner every Sunday. I'm rebuilding, slowly, one day at a time. I haven't dated anyone since Marcus, haven't even tried. Dr. Chen says that's okay. That trust takes time to rebuild, that I'll know when I'm ready. Maybe someday, maybe never. Right now, I'm okay with being alone, with trusting only myself. The anger has faded some. Not completely. I don't think it ever will. But it's not the white-hot rage it used to be. Now it's just a dull ache, a permanent bruise on my psyche. I think about David sometimes, wonder if he's rebuilding too, if he's found work, if he's told his mother what he did, if he thinks about me, if he regrets his choices. But mostly, I don't think about him at all. He doesn't deserve space in my head anymore. People ask me sometimes how I didn't see it sooner, how I could have believed David for so long, how I could have missed so many obvious signs. And here's what I tell them. You believe the people you love. You trust them. You give them the benefit of every doubt, because imagining they're capable of something so terrible, so dangerous, so fundamentally wrong is unthinkable. Until it isn't. Until you're sitting in your living room at 3 a.m., watching footage of your husband scrubbing his skin raw while crying and apologizing to no one. Until you're opening his car trunk and finding a hazmat suit and receipts for illegal medical waste disposal. Until you're sitting in a doctor's office, being told you have heavy metal poisoning and elevated cancer risk because of your husband's crimes. The red flags were there, the inconsistencies, the locked doors, the excessive cleaning, the chemical smell, the thrown-away clothes, the $800 water bills. But I explained them away, made excuses, trusted when I should have questioned. And that's what I'm here to tell you now. If you're watching this and something in your relationship feels wrong, trust that feeling. If your gut is screaming at you that something isn't right, listen to it. Don't ignore the red flags. Don't explain them away. Don't convince yourself you're being paranoid or crazy or a bad partner for having doubts. Investigate. Ask questions. Demand answers. Install the camera. Check the car trunk. Follow them if you have to. Because sometimes, the person you love most in the world is capable of hurting you in ways you never imagined. Not always out of malice. Sometimes out of desperation, greed, fear, weakness. And sometimes, the only way to save yourself is to stop trusting them and start trusting yourself. Your instincts exist for a reason. They're trying to protect you. Don't ignore them because you're afraid of what you might find. I ignored mine for too long, and I'm paying the price. Will be paying it for the rest of my life. But I'm alive. I'm healing. I survived. And if you're in a situation right now where something feels wrong, where the explanations don't add up, where your partner's behavior has changed in ways you can't explain, you can survive too. But you have to act. You have to trust yourself. You have to be brave enough to face the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. If this story opened your eyes, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories about betrayal, survival, and justice. Drop a comment below. Tell me your name and where you're from. Have you ever ignored red flags in a relationship? What would you have done differently? Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's making excuses, someone who needs permission to trust their gut. Remember, if something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't wait until it's too late to find out the truth. Trust yourself. Your instincts are trying to save you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.